Welcome to Run, Build, Grow, the podcast that laces up its running shoes and dives deep into the heartbeat of the communal spirit of running. I'm your host, Andrew Ware, the Runnin' Rev, and I'm thrilled to take you on this exhilarating journey where we explore stories that go beyond the pavement. In this episode, I am joined by Abiye Okuchaba, who is out of Denver, Colorado. This man has an amazing story, not the best story. And I say that as he has had some struggles. He had some times where things have not been good for him, and yet he continues to push through. He continues to be a figure in the Denver running community that is putting himself out there, that's doing amazing things, and is finding a way, and we'll talk about it, to just balance like a ton of different things between loving to run marathons, being a husband and father, working a full-time job, doing all of these different things. His story is so motivating and inspiring, especially for someone like me who is just trying to do what I am trying to do. And it was so amazing to have this conversation with him. But before we get into it, I'd like to shout out my partnership with Lucky Road Run Shop. Are you ready to run strong and feel great doing it? At Lucky Road Run Shop, they specialize in making every runner, walker, and fitness enthusiast get that perfect fit. Their trained staff takes the time to analyze your gait, your stride, and match you with the right shoe, because the right fit changes everything. With top brands like Ultra, Asics, Brooks, Hoka, Mizuno, New Balance, On, Saucony, Topo, they carry the best gear to keep you moving comfortably mile after mile. Visit one of their Central Virginia locations and check them out at luckyroadrunshop.com, because every step should feel like a lucky one. Lucky Road Run Shop, where the journey begins. And now let's jump into this episode with Abiye. Welcome in, everybody. This is a fun one for the first time in my podcasting history. And I've been, Run, Build, Grow is in its second year. I had a podcast before this. I've been doing this for like 5 years now, folks. For the first time ever, I forgot to hit record. So my guest has graciously come back, and we are going to start our conversation from the very beginning. And friends, if the first time we had this conversation is any indication, this is about to be an amazing episode. This is going to be a one. Listen up, stop what you're doing, or just get zoned in on that run. We are welcoming in Abiye Okuchaba. I got it right this time. There we go. So Abiye, how you doing today?
Doing good. I'm blessed. Doing good. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Yeah, man, definitely. This is going to be great. And so let's start at the top, where we start with every guest. Abiye, what is your community, and what makes your community awesome?
Yeah, love that start, and I love that question. So for me, my community is a group of inclusive runners. When it comes to paces, races of all kinds, we all come together to accomplish one goal, which probably sounds like every run group, but the thing that makes us different is we meet at 5 a.m. So we really enjoy running early before life gets crazy. So it's a lot of professionals of all kinds that meet together in the morning.
And you're a very busy gentleman to begin with, and that's kind of what led to this 5 a.m. And remember, guys, he says they're starting at 5 a.m., which means they are up before 5 a.m. So what's that look like for you? What was sort of the catalyst that brought you to this point where it's like, one, I'm very busy. I have a professional life that kind of makes it better for me to run before my day really gets started, as well as family. I imagine you kind of start running by yourself for a while, but also wanting to run with others. So what was kind of the catalyst to really get this group going? And how does that balance with that daily life?
Yeah. So when I first started out on my run journey, probably like, 3.5 years ago, and I was about to turn 40, and I just wanted to do something that was amazing. And I was like, I'm going to run, my second marathon. My first one was a disaster. And I was like, I'm never doing that again. But I was like, I'm going to do this again, but I'm going to really train. I'm going to get a coach. And so I got excited about running, my next marathon. And I had a patella tendon injury. So, I'm not the fastest runner, but I'm out there getting it in. And so I at that time had 2 kids, and just thinking about life and trying to figure out, like, how can I make this work? So it's not this struggle because, training for a 5K is one thing, training for a half is one, training for a marathon, it just takes a lot of time, especially on the weekends. And that's when a lot of the magic happens with the family and sports and other things. And so I said, all right, I'm going to do it early. So I'd run at like 3 a.m. I'd run like 3:30, 4 a.m. So I was just, solo runner all by myself early in the morning. And then one morning, one particular morning I was running, it probably started at like 3:30. And I noticed this guy, running towards me. And I was, a little bit intimidated because it looked like he was running directly towards me. And then he got behind me. And then I actually, veered off to the next lane thinking he'd run past me, but he kept running towards me. So, unfortunately, we had this interaction where he grabbed me and I, took off running. And, it shook me up. Even now to this day, if you, run with me, you'll notice my cadence has this like turn over my shoulder where I'm always, looking just to see if somebody's there. Whenever you have something bad like that happen, it's always going to be in the back of your mind. And I was talking to my coach and, she was telling me, because I at that point wanted to just stop running altogether because I knew the magic wouldn't happen. I wouldn't be able to actually run unless it was early in the morning. And she was like, just stop. Let me just put the word out. And she put a word out actually to all of our runners. And it just lined up pretty nicely on every single day. So like a Monday, I had a runner. Tuesday, I had a runner running with me. And it was all these runners running at 5 a.m. And that's really what birthed our community was after that, incident that was a tragedy, came, this beautiful thing of this run group.
And, I have to imagine after an event like that, obviously runner safety becomes a huge deal for you and what that looks like. And so, when you're in community, what is the emphasis that you're continuing to put on runner safety, not just for your own, maybe processing and continuing to heal from your own PTSD from this event, but also, as a way to help make sure that others feel safe when they're on the run, because we don't know where a lot of folks are coming from sometimes when they're joining our groups. And when we think about morning running, it's happening at times that, depending on the time of the year, it may not be as safe. It may still be dark outside. It may be harder to account for safety. What are some things that you're doing in the Denver, in the Boulder, this greater Colorado community that you're a part of, that's helping to address runner safety? Because it's not even just people following you, but everything.
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And when I think about even my incident, we all have these stereotypes of like, it only happens to women, what was she wearing? All these things that shouldn't even happen as far as like, why did she get attacked? Was it in the day or not? The camera's probably deceiving, but I'm not a little guy, I'm 6'3", 200 pounds. And so I'm not the person you would think would normally, have something like that happen. But, it just really emphasizes that it can happen to anybody. And unfortunately, the way the world is going, there's more people who are looking for opportunities. And so for us, really running together is the biggest thing that we're doing. And so it's easy, for a lot of people who don't really want to run with others. But if you can run with somebody who's, near you, or even, just sending message, like my wife, she gets a Garmin text every time I'm running, which helps out when I'm running alone, but just running together. And we do it, 3 to 4 times a week. And that really helps for safety.
So y'all are getting together at 5 a.m. Even when you have your presence on social media, are you out there reminding folks and being part of that conversation? I remember not too long ago, we had an incident down here in Hampton Roads about a woman kind of getting tailed. And, fortunately, she was able to get away, but it kind of heightened a lot of our senses in the Hampton Roads area. And we had an event that was put on by our local run club, and they started handing out, pepper spray and the little like push button alarms that make the noise like that. What does that look like in your community? And maybe what can unfortunately, there is no way that we can control the other people. And, if we had done this yesterday, I wouldn't have this story, but I was just thinking about it because, like I told you, I just got done with the run right before we hopped on, trying to get it through my day. And about like 200 meters from the end of my run, I passed this woman. And and of course, I'm always that person. I'm yelling out, I want you to know that I'm coming, know that I'm there, just so that I don't like haunt you. Well, at the same time that I'm passing her, this guy on this motorbike or like one of those e-bikes passes, and he like stops right in front of me, is like looking behind me or like looking behind himself, and then he goes back. In my mind, I thought, well, maybe he knows this woman and he's going back and he's trying to have a conversation with her. I don't know. I finish my run. I'm walking. I go back to my car. I get my, water bottle out. I'm trying to cool down. The woman passes me as she's coming in. She says, "I'm so glad you were there because that guy was really creeping me out." And I'm just like, so you can't control the other people. And so a lot of times all we can do, unfortunately, is control ourselves. Now, we can call it out when it happens. And I wish the guy had still been there because I probably would have given him an earful for it. But as runners, what are those things that maybe we can be doing? What are those things our communities can be doing to help make sure that running is safe, at least from our perspective?
Yeah. I think that's a tough question because I do the same thing whenever I'm running past somebody alone, especially a female. And this probably happened during COVID where I'd always just go to the side, as a larger, African-American runner, I want no one to be intimidated. So it's always just been in my mind. And that's even in the workplace. You try to make yourself a little bit smaller than you are or say hi. But I think just a simple, inviting people in. We see a lot of runners who are in the park that we're in. We always try to reach out to them, always try to get them to run with them, especially if it is a, person that's just running by themselves. So that's one thing we do, waving to runners and just making sure your presence is known. And even in our group alone, we'll never let anybody run by themselves. I think it's intimidating for any runner, whether you're, on the faster side or the slower side, to join a run group, especially for the first time, because you're thinking, please don't get dropped, right? I don't want to get dropped whether they're too fast. But, on the back, whenever I'm running, I'm always trying to, be at the back of the caboose, right? I'm always trying to hold down and make sure everyone is taken care of. So no runners left behind in our crew.
And it's so great because that embodies that sense of community, right? We always say that we're stronger when we're together, when we can kind of come around and even as a community commit to one another. And like I said, even if it is someone running on their own, how could we be better about calling out those times where someone feels unsafe and maybe trying to, make sure that other folks know that. And then you also bring up the point of being an African American, being a Black male in our society. And I think that's a little bit part of your journey and a little bit part of that experience as well. And how you yourself are present within the community and what that means for folks. Because when we talk about a safe running community, you mentioned it earlier, we also talk about an inclusive running community. We talk about a community where we can practice as we are. What has that meant for you as a Black man to be able to be who you are? That's a theme in this podcast, you are on the run and as a marathon runner.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that up because it's huge for me. I think every time I go to a marathon, I'm always looking around in the crowd, and I just don't see a lot of people who look like me. In the marathons I've been at, maybe it's different in Detroit, but when I go to a marathon, it's very few, right? Everyone talks about, there's always going to be, the Kenyans and the other, Black runners. But when it talks American-born, African-American runners, there's just not a lot that'll run that long distance. So I grew up in Aurora, Colorado, and we played a lot of hoops, a lot of basketball, but we didn't run. And so I even still to this day have friends who are oh, you're doing the white man sport. They're running and just joking around because there's just not a lot of people who look like me who are doing the longer distance running. So for me, it really motivates, I think, people around me. And so I think just seeing me out there, getting friends involved, being on the run. My sister's running her first half marathon this year. And so I think that impact is hopefully going to, just continue to grow within my community as we get more and more people who look like me out running.
And I think that's just such an important thing to kind of bring to the sport and such an important perspective. Because I remember, and I think there's this growth that happens, especially when it comes to racial culture in sports. And one that I've noticed more so, right now as I'm 35 and I think back, 20 years ago when I was in high school, when I was a youth, I remember running a lot of these races, and I remember seeing the runners of African descent. I remember seeing the Kenyans, the Ethiopians. I remember seeing all of them and being involved in, these big long distances. On the track they're doing the 5 and the 10, and they're on the roads they're doing the marathon. I'd see them at all these half marathons. They'd be coming over. But then you get to the Americans, and it's American runners are just, the long distance runners are white. And I don't know that I ever really thought about it a whole lot until I got older, and I really started kind of being aware of that situation.
Yeah.
So how did you begin to see yourself in the sport? And I ask that to say, like, it's really easy for me to see myself in the sport, right? I'm your typical, I'm white. I'm a pastor, so like I'm a Christian. I'm not an evangelical Christian. Like, let's not go that far. I am, yeah. So I like to be very inclusive, y'all. Just I want you to know that. But it's easy for me to see myself. And I think an important thing in doing and participating in sports is being able to see yourself in the sport. And unfortunately, in our culture, sometimes people have to sort of break that barrier themselves so that others can. So did you see yourself early on in this distance running sport? How did you see yourself in that? And what was it like maybe for you to come through?
Yeah. I don't know if I actually saw myself in the sport. I think when I originally thought about doing the marathon, it was really just to like do something crazy before I turned 40 and just check a box, right? And then I would go on these runs by myself, and I got this, I wouldn't even call it runner's high. It was a way to just connect and do a hard thing. And then when I had the rest of my day, it was easy because I just ran 7 miles, right? The rest of the day was easy. So I kind of liked the ability to do something hard and let it translate to the rest of my world. The other thing for me, I talked about kind of like, pushing the African-American community and wanting them to be involved was health wise, right? Like I want, people to live a long life. And for me, like I started to have like this, like chest pain and asthma. And it was really weird. I went to so many doctors trying to figure out what was it. The only way it was gone and wasn't there is if I ran. And so they were like, just keep running. And so I did that. So I think that helped me. And then I just caught the runner's bug and got excited about, diversity and wanting more people who look like me to try this. Cause there's so many things, I think the health benefits and then just overall, just trying to get more people active and involved in it.
And so let's kind of so let's take that back to its natural beginning where you began to run, and you talk about that motivation to want to get running. And I know just in general as a society, there's a sense of healthiness that a lot of us wish we could have. And for me, I know that movement, and especially movement for me defined as running and or walking. Again, walkers, you are runners. Y'all are in the club, I promise.
Yes.
We're letting you in, right? Right, Abiye? We're letting walkers into the running club.
Come on.
And so what did that motivation look like for you from the beginning to get into, maybe a more healthy movement-based lifestyle? And then what does it look like for you training for marathons, right? You talk about that first marathon went terribly. My first marathon went terribly, and I decided to never go back. So you have a completely different story of wanting to try it again, which is amazing. And so I want to hear about that journey. What was the motivation that got it started? And then going back.
Yeah, the motivation really just started from wanting to, check off the box. That was really it. I think I was in, health wise, decent shape. But as I started running, I did start to notice these other health reasons like this asthma, and it would go away when I would run, whenever, it was almost like this use it or lose it type of thing. And so whenever I had an injury or I was out for a little bit, I ruptured my shoulder, and not running, killed me. And I was just like having these breathing issues. So that was the biggest thing for me when I came to wanting to do that. And then as far as, how marathon training has been, a coach changes everything, right? So I did the first one coachless, and that was a big no-no. I know some people do the Hal Higdon and other things. That's what I did. But for me, I need that motivation, and the accountability is what really helps. And so I have a really great coach who's out in Boulder who helps me. But yeah, in general, it's making sure I'm checking the boxes and doing the work. So I think when I was doing it on my own, there'd be days that I didn't want to get up and do it. So I didn't do it. Right. But when I know that, all right, I know final surge is going to be checked, and hey, why didn't you run the 3 miles? Right. It's a different kind of accountability. So that's helped me out in the same way, really meeting with the group and knowing that I'm going to be there for the people who are also training for other goals has helped out too. So the group's helped, and the coach has really helped as far as marathon training goes.
And you talk about training. What is it? What's the difference been like in those two marathons? Obviously that first marathon, you kind of go in there, you're a very early runner. And remind me if my timeline's off, but you also haven't experienced that traumatic event yet, correct?
Oh yeah, when I first started training. Yeah.
And so then you're coming into that second marathon and you're getting with your coach, or even marathons you're doing now, and you've experienced what is a traumatic time, and now you're coming back in. And I have to imagine that because you experienced it on the run, you're also dealing with that, as you said, every time you run. What's that training been like for you these days, and even leading into that second marathon?
Yeah. So these days, I'm running a lot solo and with the group, and so the terrain has changed from running in the metro area to now I'm running more on streets. For safety for me, that's my go-to. Even though I'm dodging cars, which I don't know which is worth, people or cars, but that's what it looks like now. So a lot of street running, and I think the thing that helped me out in the training was the speed work and doing more on the track. So even at 5 a.m., finding tracks that I could run at. And most times there's always someone in the group who has speed work too. We kind of align it with the same days. So that was a game changer as well for me. So, having speed days, doing long runs with community, and just the consistency as well. And also, wanting to do more, just strengthening in weights, especially on my legs.
And it progresses you to a place where it seems like community, not more than, but community is starting to play a big role in your running journey, as you are also accomplishing PRs, as you're trying to become a better physical runner in the, I guess, the traditional sense. And I mentioned this yesterday, but we talk about sort of this new sense where, at least in this new running boom, where it seems to be about all of these run groups, all these run communities, all these run clubs, people getting together, people motivating one another on the run. You found this same niche that I think a lot of other runners are, of helping to pace folks, helping folks to reach their own goals. What kind of began that desire for you?
Yeah. So I have a good friend, and his motto is, no one finishes a marathon by themselves, alone. No one finishes a marathon alone is his quote. And it makes a lot of sense when I think about community, whether it's, mother and father-in-law taking care of the kids so I can go on a long run when my wife's out of town, being on runs, being able to, pace each other, on speed day and long runs, and even really during a race. Like I'm always looking for that one individual who's struggling. Sometimes it's me, somebody's looking for me at times, but I remember, I think it was Colorado Marathon, and there was somebody who was, just like walk, run, just really struggling, and just picking him up and saying, we're going to finish this together. And so, just that push to make sure I'm holding people accountable, and they'll, helping me out to make sure we cross the finish line at the same time. I've never had a marathon where that hasn't happened.
And it really shows up when you talk about what it means for you to be able to run. And you talk about it, listeners, I send out just a few questions just to help kind of not necessarily get our conversation started, but give me a little bit of background about where you're coming from. And one of the things that you say of just contributing back to the community, and I'll read this, is on the days I really don't want to show up, I don't want anyone to be left out or have to run a pace that's comfortable just to keep up with the group. And so there's this sense in which one of the things that is motivating you to get out of the house, to go on a run, is the community.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that for a second? Because I think that is such an amazing, for me, it is so humbling, because I can count times in the last month where I am literally sitting in my chair, my running shoes are at my feet. They're not on my feet yet. I haven't put them on. And I'm just looking, and I'm like, all right, do I go on a run? Like, can I go for a run? And then I'm like, all right, let's get the running shoes. Like, you do it one step at a time, right? You put the running shoes on. It's like, all right, now the running shoes are on. Now I got to go on a run. And I find ways to convince myself, no, I can't go on a run. My watch I have a Koros, so I can delete my run without it not being recorded as long as my run is less than a minute. Yeah. So I will find ways to convince myself not to run up to 59.9 seconds into my run, and have done it before, unfortunately. Yeah. But man, that motivation for you, and I know solo runs are a completely different beast, right? I mean, those are always the tough ones. But for one of your motivations to go out and run, especially for a run at 5 a.m., is it's not that. I mean, I'm sure there is the personal component of it, but it's like, man, I want to make sure that those who are there feel like they don't want to be left out. And you know what? Even if I'm running, I want to make sure that I'm there with them. Can you just talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks for bringing that up. It's definitely a motivation, and it's definitely not for me. It's for other people because we live in Colorado, and unfortunately, we have these months where it's snowing outside, and you can come up with all kinds of excuses not to go out. And the solo runs, it does happen, unfortunately. But when you know that, all right, it's a group day on Friday or a Wednesday or a Monday, and there's going to be a runner who is, maybe, going to be in the back of the pack and needs some assistance and some help, and somebody who, will be able to keep up with them without them really straining. It definitely motivates you to get out the door and make it happen for sure. There's days that I miss, but it's so much easier when I know, all right, I got to do it for them for sure.
And to say, like, in a lot of ways, that often, when we think about what it means to run in the community, is, what does it mean to show up? Listeners, if you go back when I interview, James Dowell, I mean, this was all the way back last year, probably about this time last year, maybe. But if you go back and listen to that, for Prolific Run Club there in Charlottesville, they're like, part of their motto is just show up. Right. And so what does that mean for you, either on Run Club day or either on the days that you kind of meet together? But even also, like, what does that mean to show up on race day? What are you showing up as? What are you showing up with?
Yeah. So, I mean, race day or on solo runs, I'm wanting to be consistent for a lot of reasons. One is, I talked about the health, so that's one of the reasons. The other is the diversity and inclusion. Like, I want people to see me out there because I know it's going to make a difference for a lot of people. There's never a time where I'm not, noticing somebody in the crowd or noticing somebody on the race that we're giving them, just that head nod that's enough to see, I see you out here, brother. And so that's huge. And then showing up for my community, the group of 5 a.m. runners that, collectively become best friends by running. So I think those three things are big motivators for me to just keep going and definitely to keep showing up.
And in the midst of a busy life too, because and we kind of alluded to it earlier, but this life as a professional, right? We talk about what working all the time, like having a 9 to 5, or God forbid, some other crazy hours, having wife and kids, as you've talked about, and then also wanting to get runs in, right? And listeners will know marathon training is no slouch. Like, you're spending long runs like 2, 3, 4 hours on a run. So how do you maintain that balance between work, running, family, life, right? I mean, it's all these things balanced together. How are you maintaining all those things, and how are you balancing them out?
Yeah. A 9 to 5 would be great. I wish those hours.
There you go.
I have way more hours than that, but it's hard to balance it. I think for me, the one thing that I'm trying to think through is putting me first in my time. I feel like if I can really pour into myself, initially, it's going to make it so much easier to pour into others, kids and my wife. And so that's kind of how I start my day, running, having, while I'm by myself, it's just either audiobooks or prayers or things just are going to help me to be able to pour in. And then when it comes to, with others, I get recharged off of community and the conversations we have. We don't have many of those, really like, how's your day conversations. They go deep. We have so many different topics and things that we've went through that really, really help me. But that's a good way to just manage my day, is like, let me check off the box of what I need to do for me as far as like just the running and checking off the box and making sure I'm ready for the marathon that are coming. And then, structuring everything else around that. That's why I know that it just wouldn't happen if I ever try to run at 12 or, 5 p.m.
And to be able to balance that as well, I'm sure also allows you to enjoy what you enjoy. I can remember back when I was doing more training and kind of getting things in, those 5 a.m. runs. And like I said, I kind of wanted to run at 5 a.m. today, and it didn't work out because of how I thought my schedule was going to play out. And so what's it been like in your experience, taking on, those responsibilities, balancing work and continuing to meet your goals? Because I have to imagine, you have times where you want to hit a PR, and it does require sacrifice in some areas. And so what does even that sacrifice maybe look like?
Yeah, and it's tough. I feel like there's probably times that I fail, whether it's in accomplishing some of the goals that are in final surge that I need to hit, or if it's in being a dad or being a husband, and even career wise. But I try to excel at all of them, but it's really taking slices out of my day and making sure I'm really focused when I am. So when I'm running, there's not really many multitasking when I'm doing that. And then when I'm, making breakfast for the kids, I'm really trying to be dialed in and be focused. But it's tough for me to do, because I am a multitasker. But I think those are things that help me out, is just making sure when I'm in the moment, I'm giving it 100%.
And in sort of that model, I think, or I would assume, just based on, this is really cool, listeners, how this one got set up is when Alex, y'all remember Alex Dilts, who was on not too long ago, and it wasn't even Alex, it was the Run Boulder Instagram account that kind of said, hey, this guy has an amazing story and would be a great guest. And it seems like you've become a leader in the running community, not just a participator in the running community. And so how has maybe being seen as a leader in the running community, what does that mean for you? What does that kind of entail for you? I don't even know if maybe it's a way you've considered it, but at least from my perspective, you appear to be someone who is from the forefront leading in this community and is a big part of things that are happening on the run in Denver, in Boulder, in Colorado, wherever all of this is.
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever, thought of myself as a leader in that space, but I definitely, love running. I love the community, and for me, it's wanting to make sure people are seen. And so I think there's a lot of people in kind of that front of the pack being seen. And so, mine is going to be, people who look like me and people whose paces maybe aren't, 6:30 pace. Right. And so I feel like for me, wanting to make sure people feel like, if he's doing it, I can do it when it comes to race and paces for me.
And I mean, we talked about being seen earlier and being recognized for who you are. What does that mean for you on race day? We talked about, showing up and being there. What are you looking for on race day? What brings you a sense of joy? You're whether you're pacing or you're trying to hit your own PRs, what are you looking like? You're looking around at these starting fields. What's bringing you a sense of joy in those times?
Yeah. So, there's a couple things I look for. The first thing is I'm looking for people who look like me. That's just always something that I go for. I may not talk to them initially, but there's a head nod or all right, there's another one. So I'm always looking for people whenever it's race day. Setting a PR or being on pace to set a PR is great. When you're having a good day, it, right? When the wheels come off, it's not as fun, but it's good to know that, things that you trained for months, you're hitting on all cylinders. The other thing is family. So, I'm a, family, especially on races. My wife has always came with me through marathons. She's been able to support me, which is amazing. And so when I get to see her at mile 13 or, mile 20, it definitely gives me a huge boost of energy. So seeing a community, seeing people who look like me, and seeing family is always going to help me out on race day.
And what does your goal setting look like? And again, I keep on reiterating how you view your understanding of running and movement. And so goals are going to look different from season to season if you're looking for a PR, if you're looking to pace. And so what does that goal setting time look like, whether it's at the beginning of the season, as you're adapting, when you're working with your coach?
Yeah. So my thing is I always want to get better. And, I think setting like right now I'm like a 4:30 marathon. Being faster than that would be amazing. And so if I can just inch better each and every time I'm doing races, I'm going to feel good. And so we always come up with like an A, B, C goal. We're shooting for the A goal. If I land in the middle, great. Even if it's not a good day, hopefully I'm getting something out of it. So I'll have some races where it's just about having fun, right? So I run a boulder a lot, and it's more of a party, pace for me, as opposed to like a race day. With I know a lot of people race a boulder, but it's such a fun race. I've never just raced it, but yeah, when it comes to marathons, that's when I've really set the bar and goals for wanting to get better each and every race.
And as you're looking at maybe as the community continues to develop, and not even just your 5 a.m. community, but we've kind of unpacked so many different areas of community that you are a part of. But as you're looking at all of these new and different places that you are in the running community, that you're present, and you begin to see new people continuing to come in, continuing to experience that. This is the biggest running boom since I think it's like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
What kind of advice might you be giving these new runners, especially those runners who, akin to your story, they are business professionals and they're just having a difficult time finding a time to run. They're people who have traumas in their past and are trying to find a way to, mentally make one foot go in front of the other again with that trauma. If they're a part of underrepresented communities who are struggling to see themselves as they're trying to enter this community, what kind of advice would you maybe give these runners?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing I'd say is just keep showing up. It's hard to do it, especially if you're just starting, right? Like you mentioned, it is a big running boom, and I'm part of that boom in the last 3 years. And so showing up makes a big difference. So, I think when I started out, especially when I was solo, it was running way too fast, right? And just blowing up and feeling like the next day hurts, right? And so running slower to get faster is one of those things that I had to learn from a coach. I when she was telling me to run, these slower paces, I'm like, there's no way, right? And so,
Yeah.
and then also you have that situation of just like social media is everywhere, right? You're going to be on Instagram, you're going to see, people's, paces, outfits, where they're running at. And so it's easy to get pulled into that. And so if you can keep showing up, be yourself, you're going to be just fine in this space, which I know it's tough to do though.
And unfortunately it is. I always hope that like the community moves past, the gatekeeping of everything and what that looks like. And we were talking about it yesterday, and just the different levels that it feels like you have to accomplish this. It's almost like you have that timeline of you're a runner, but if you've been doing it for like this long, well, you should be at this point by now. And so it's not even just like getting into running, where unfortunately I think we still see some gatekeeping. And there is, I see some of the positives of starting to turn that over, and what it means to define ourselves as a quote unquote runner. Like, when are you a runner? When you start running, and you're always a runner. It doesn't matter if you have to stop running for whatever reason, you're always going to be a runner. I always tell folks, I'm not a marathoner, but I am. It's kind of like I'm not a practicing marathoner. I have run a marathoner, I've run a marathon. That was really weird phrasing. But I'm not running a marathon. I'm not intending on running a marathon right now, but I've done it. That makes me a marathoner. That makes me someone who's done it, someone who's been there. And so, how do you view maybe this idea that there continues to be gatekeeping within the broader running community? And we've been talking for almost 40 minutes now about, without actually talking about it, of kind of ways that you've broken down some of those gates, but continuing to reiterate. So what are some of those ways that you've seen that gatekeeping, and what are some ways that maybe you're continuing to work or want to work in the future as we go forward? Maybe what are some ways that we can be better as a running community to stop that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I feel like I mentioned earlier, I still have friends who are like, why are you doing that sport? That's for white boys. Like, why is it? Right. And so I think that's probably just a stereotype that people have. And why is that? So if you're seeing me doing it, so, one is just me continuing to be in the sport, and other people who are, even faster than me, who, look like me, who are in the sport doing a great job, it's just going to break down those walls and have people realize that it not only is a good sport, but it's for everybody. And I think there's, in general, other gates as far as just maybe it's, qualifying for certain races, right? We're going to see walls up when it comes to that. And so, yeah, my goal is to, continue to break down those walls any way I can. But yeah, I think there's probably always going to be, gates up, but the more we're here in that space, the better.
Like you said, representation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was reflecting as I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it's somebody who is currently in our American miler crew, 1500 crew that's running, and the question was, well, like, okay, well, when are you going to step up to the 5K? When are you going to step up to the 10K? When are you going to step up to the marathon? And now my mind is always just going to go to, and forever and ever is just, and I don't know how much you follow kind of the professional side of running, but recently, just phenomenal American miler, American 1500 meter runner, Jenny Simpson, tried her hand at the marathon, and it didn't work for her at a professional level. I think, she's still out there. She's doing amazing things. I want to say she did the 7 continent challenge, the 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days. And I see her like taking away sort of the I have to compete in the marathon and kind of getting rid of that. But it's like, what if that's where you're comfortable? What if, we allow something to just be what it is? I kind of feel like I've dropped my, we were talking about this. I've dropped my feeling of feeling like I have to run a marathon. Does that mean I'll never run a marathon again? I don't know right now. I might get down the road a couple of years and I might just be like, all right, I need a new challenge. I need to do something. But it's always kind of that thought in the back of the mind of like, well, man, like I feel like everybody expects that I have to do a marathon because I'm this, quote unquote great, not great. I mean, I have my paces, right? We all have our paces, but like, right, I'm out there, I'm running, I'm consistent in it. And so it's like, well, you got to like get to the marathon eventually.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important for us to just, what's it like for you? I don't know how this is going to sound, but what's it like for you to get lost in your own journey rather than trying to think about comparing yourself to someone else who's doing something?
Yeah. That's a good question, because I feel like there's oftentimes when I talk to people who aren't in the space, but they know just enough, that's where the comparison happens, right? Where it's like, oh, you're running a marathon. When are you going to run Boston? When are you going to qualify for Boston? Because they know just enough. And so I'm like, I have to break down what it means, to qualify for Boston type of thing. And then, for me, it plays in my head of like, am I ever going to qualify? Like, is my pace, how old do I have to be to get there? Right. And so that's that comparison thing that I don't know if there's any way to get past it. We all just struggle with it. We all want to excel and do better. And that's a good thing, but being realistic and making sure you're not, comparing yourself, because it's about the thief of joy, right? But it is a tough space to be, especially when I'm talking to people who don't really understand running.
Yeah. And maybe that's part of it, is like there always needs to be an education more to the general public. And I imagine it's that way for just about every sport that has ever existed, because the only real experience we get in watching sports is the elite tier of sports, right? If you're watching football, or if you're consuming football, you're most likely consuming NFL, college. If you're consuming basketball, you're most likely you're consuming what is this elite talent of things. And especially when we think about running, while running is, yes, an elite sport, it's an elite sport. I don't know how to express this, and I'm probably about to like make a lot of people angry, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think it's an elite sport built on the back of amateurs, or hobby joggers. And maybe I say that because for the longest time, when Kiera D'Amato was making her like breakthrough back in like 2020, 2021, she kept on calling herself a hobby jogger. And I kept on thinking, I'm like, man, that's so cool because I can actually see myself in an elite marathoner because and I mean, we both lived in the same city, same county. So like claim to fame. No, I'm kidding. Back when she lived in the Richmond area. But you could, especially with how vocal she's been about her journey, you could see, the ups and then the downs and coming back down. And so I wonder how much we continue to get maybe the everyday runner, right? Listeners, I'll remind you, and Abiye will remind you, is, when I said 9 to 5, he wished it was a 9 to 5. And you have what, 2 kids? I think you said
kids,
3 kids.
3 kids, yep.
3 kids, a wife, like full on family that he has to take care of. And finding time to run. And to me, that's what running looks like.
Yeah.
That's what running, and I think the more I hope, and honestly, like that's why I love getting the everyday people who've never been on a podcast before, and you have been on a podcast. I didn't see it come through. Getting those kinds of folks on, and so having that experience become more normalized, for you. What do you think the impact would have been if there had been an Abiye in your life that you looked at when you were getting into running? What would that have looked like for you, do you think?
Yeah, would have changed a lot, right? I think, if you don't see somebody do something, you don't realize, how fast you can actually run a mile, right? And so seeing someone who looks like me who, not only is running, those faster distance, which I did see growing up, I saw a lot of track stars, but I didn't see a lot of people running the long distance. And I resonate with the pain of the marathon, right? I like doing it once a year and just being able to check that box of like something that's really hard. And so, it would have changed everything. And so hopefully I'm that for somebody, even if it's one person, maybe it's my son, who sees like, all right, this is something I can do too, right? And it's for everybody.
That's awesome. I love that. Oh, man. All right, let's hit these end of podcast questions as we wrap up here. All right. Let's see. All right, let's learn a little bit more about Abiye on the run. Okay. Speed run or long run?
The long run.
All right. Oh man. All right. See, here we go. Listeners know exactly the question that's coming next. And they're probably like screaming it into the void right now. Morning or evening run?
Oh, I'm always going to be morning. Always.
All right. Summer or winter?
Ooh, that is so tough. Because I don't really like being really hot. Also don't like freezing. I'm gonna go summer though, because more people come out in our 5 a.m. runs in the summer morning.
I think Lindsay and I unpacked this. I'm gonna track the location that someone is and whether they answered summer or winter. Because like Lindsay Hyde and I were on the podcast a couple of weeks ago and talking, and of course, she lives in North Carolina, and she was like, "Oh no, winter running. Like the bugs are gone, the humidity's down," and I'm like, "Preach! Like I'll deal with a little cold weather if it means I don't have to run in 98 degrees with 100% humidity." And then you have like these Colorado folks who are like, "I do not want to run in the winter. There is freezing temperatures and snow and ice, and I think I'll take the."
Still do it, but yeah, it's tough. Well, 5 a.m. in the summer is not that bad in Colorado, so yeah, for sure, summer runner.
All right, so what are you listening to while you run?
Yeah, it goes back and forth. I mean, like today it was nothing but myself, and I loved it. Other days it's a podcast or like audiobooks. So if I had to pick one, I would say that majority I'll listen to some sort of like audiobook.
Okay. What's your favorite distance to race?
I would say the 5K or the marathon. Yeah. Something that's quick. It'll go quick or long. There's no in between for me.
All right. And finally, Abiye, can you give us a reason to join a reason for our listeners to join their local run club?
Yeah. I think as long as your run club is inclusive and it's going to let all paces be in there, you're going to get so much value from it. You're going to probably find your best friend, hopefully within that community. And so I think just making sure you join something that you can be a part of is going to help you, but more importantly, it's going to help the others around you.
Again, as I always say, if that doesn't get y'all out on the run, if that doesn't get y'all out joining folks, I don't know what will. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it.
All right. I told y'all that was going to be a great episode. I do not lie, and I did not this time. That was truly just an amazing interview. I wish y'all could have heard the first one. Just as good, but I think this one was even better. I had like all of my notes from the transcript from the first interview to make sure that I was trying to ask mostly the same questions and not necessarily, I didn't follow the same trajectory, but I at least kind of got all of the topics in there, which was my primary goal in re-recording it. Again, first time, like 5 years of recording podcasts, for the most part, not 100% doing podcasts in there, but still 5 years and first time for getting to hit record. All of the other podcast folks are there like, I get your pain, friend, those lost audios. But back to Abiye, who was just an amazing guest. And I hope his story inspired you as much as really it's inspired me to want to get out and be on the run and just be a great advocate for inclusive, welcoming, making sure that we are highlighting all of these different ways that we can be good running community for anybody and everybody who joins. I think that is one of the huge things that I get out of this, and also just to never let things get in the way of caring for yourself with this sort of movement. I mean, we heard the story about that traumatic experience that he went through and everything that he's gone through since then. It hasn't stopped his running journey. In fact, it seems like his running journey has escalated since then. And it's not that he doesn't still hold on to that trauma, but he doesn't allow it to fill him with the fear that he can't do it anymore. And I know that there are some where it's a different story, and I respect that. And I also think that in that, for Abiye, it is this determination to continue to be this person, to show himself, to show up as who he is, and to bring that, I think, is such an inspiring thing. And so, again, thank you so much, Abiye, for bringing your story, for bringing that experience, for bringing that conversation. As we move our time out today, I just want to thank y'all so much for hanging out with me here on Run, Build, Grow. As always, find me Instagram, Blue Sky, Substack. I am in all of those places. I'd love to connect with you there, especially there on Substack. Make sure you subscribe to the newsletter after my Lenten series that I did. So that time before Easter, I did 40 days worth of devotions. Now we are post that time. And so I am trying to find what is my next project that I'm going to do, taking a little bit of a break from posting on there, but I got a couple of things in the bank. So make sure to go get subscribed over there. You can also support me on Substack. And so going to go ahead and shout that one out. You can become a paid member over on my Substack and help to support not just my writing, but my podcasting. Or you can head on over to buymeacoffee.com/runandrev. You can leave a one-time tip. That's the cool thing about Buy Me a Coffee. You can buy me a coffee or a beer, as I have it listed there, and just drop a tip if you really loved this conversation with Abiye, or you just want to drop something one time. That's great. Or if you want to become like my number one fan, I know, sorry all of y'all out there, Chris Elliott, Dat Frenchie, always dropping the amazing comments over on Spotify, becoming a new monthly supporter of Run and Rev, of Run, Build, Grow over on buymeacoffee.com. Thank you so much, Chris. From the bottom of my heart, it means so much. And if you want to get on that hype train and help to support this podcast, you can head over there as well. You can also be like Chris in another way and make sure to follow, make sure to subscribe to this podcast so it's always there in your feed. And head on over if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're on Apple Podcasts, leave a quick rating and review. If you're on Spotify, you can drop a rating and you can comment on this episode. Let me know what about Abiye's story really stuck out with you. And I also want to hear, how are you showing up in your community to help others grow on the run? And you know what? If you leave a review, if you leave a comment, I'm going to give you a shout out and read it out in the next episode. Thanks for being here and for being a part of this journey. Until next time, go out there, crush it, and as always, make every mile count.